Hi guys, on today's episode we're taking a deep dive comparing the V-MAX bullet to our ELD-VT bullet. Now the V-MAX is one of the more iconic varmint bullets on the market, great for traditional range varmint hunting with that polymer tip. Now the VT bullet has the heat shield tip, which has a patented drag variability reduction technology, which helps make the drag more consistent from shot to shot. This helps it be more consistent downrange. The further you shoot, the better it gets. That's where you really benefit from that patented technology. It also has a long ogive and a long boat tail when you compare it to the V-MAX bullet, making it great for some target and match shooting application as well. We hope you enjoy this deep dive of these two products, exploring their benefits, helping you to pick which one is right for you.
I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. This is the Hornady Podcast, and I'm your host, Seth Swerczek. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I've got some engineering types across the table from me. In the corner, we've got Miles Neville, and we've got Joe Thielen. Guys, thanks for coming on the show to dive into today's topic.
Sure. As always, glad to be here.
So you guys were hand-selected for this topic, not just because of your podcast prowess. You know, people got to know you. You know, there's a lot of comments. They like Joe. Maybe
they want to get to know Miles. Maybe. Yeah. Let's be honest.
Well, hell of a mustache. So, no, the reason you guys were specifically invited is not just because of your expertise, not just because of, you know, you guys are engineers here and you're passionate about what we do, but separately, you guys had a huge hand in a couple of our bullets. And this episode is an epic bullet battle of history. The original Hornady V-MAX. That bullet, released in 1996, kind of the brainchild of Dave Emery, our former senior ballistic scientist. That bullet, set the standard. Were we the first tipped varmint bullet? No. But were we the best? Gosh, in my opinion, I've shot a lot of them, especially growing up. 257 Roberts. There was some competitor bullets back in the day that I shot that shot really well. But man, there's something about a V-MAX. And Joe, obviously that bullet was designed and released well before your time here at Hornady, but not a decade later after its release, you come on board as an engineer. You worked through the case department, but you also had your hand in some really cool V-MAX bullets. And for the listener, behind the scenes, there is a whole lot of engineering that goes on with the tooling required, and that's really ultimately what you guys are doing, is designing and shaping the tooling that make the finished product. And you've had some home runs in that V-MAX lineup that we're going to talk about. Miles, similar story to Joe's, except for fast forward a few more years, and your project was the VT, the ELD-VT, and that VT standing for Varmint Target, that hybrid bullet that kind of blends the best of both worlds, the lightweight, you know, high velocity of a varmint bullet with the long aerodynamic shape of a target bullet. And those bullets, the ELD-VT and the V-MAX, they have a lot of similarities, a lot of characteristics that are similar, a lot of traits that are desirable, but they also have some differences. And so this podcast is going to compare and contrast so that the listener can say, hey, I'm going to make a switch to this bullet, or I'm already in this bullet and I don't need the other one. This is the right bullet for me. And we've done separate episodes. You go back to episode 56, which is well over 100 episodes ago. We had the V-MAX podcast where we spent an hour really dissecting everything that went into the design and the subsequent launch of that product. Fast forward to episode 97, we had the VT podcast, and that was another great episode that really outlined all of the feature sets. This one, not going to be a deep dive quite like those were. So for the listener, jump back into episode 56 or 97 if you missed them. This is going to be the juxtaposition of the two. Okay. And I think we should start with the V-MAX, kind of give, you know, some wave tops of the design. So Joe, ultimately, in a nutshell, what is the V-MAX bullet?
V-MAX is a thin-jacketed, match-grade varmint bullet. Super accurate, volatile, you know, on contact with the target or media, and, you know, rapid fragmentation.
Yeah. I like to use the word explosive expansion.
Yeah, explosive is good.
Yeah, you start pounding on some prairie dogs or even coyotes or something like that, rock chucks.
I mean, they were designed to be very, very accurate because a lot of varmints are small, especially ground squirrels and things like that, prairie dogs. And then rapid expansion because of pelt harvesting.
Oh, sure.
Fur. So,
yeah, back when that was actually worth something.
Yeah, no kidding.
Miles, growing up, you shooting any V-MAX bullets?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to shoot the 6.5, were they 95 grainers?
Yeah.
In a 6.5 Gap 4S.
Yeah, buddy. With all the speed.
Yeah. 3,900 per second.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, don't shoot AR 500 with that, I learned, because you'll poke holes through it.
Wow. Awesome. Joe, growing up, we would have been in high school or right there for the V-MAX.
It was high school. Yep.
Were you shooting V-MAXs growing up?
That's what we shot. 22 50s, 55s, and 243 75s.
Yep.
That's what we had, a 243 win, and then I had a 22 250. So yeah,
it doesn't get more iconic than a 22 250 with a 50 grain V-MAX.
Yep.
You throw some Varget 4064 something like that in there, and you have got really the predator and varmint hunter's dream.
Yep.
Yeah.
So,
growing up, we had V-MAXs all around. Dad's reloading bench had a lot of red on it, and at the time I didn't know Hornady was even in our same universe. That's just the bullets that Dad loaded.
Yep.
A lot of 75 grain V-MAXs in 25 cal. In 6mm, and then in the 22s, we shot 55s and 60s, if I remember correctly.
It was quite interesting. The little backstory of that is, so my dad is not a gun guru, right? I mean, he reloaded and shot for what he needed, shooting coyotes or hunting or practical. Yeah, a lot of. So anyway, he wasn't into it. So a lot of those old school people, I mean, call it what it is, he grew up shooting Sierra, wow, what the heck were they? I don't even remember, like a hollow point varminter bullet, because that's just what you did. I mean, that's
what the shop had. That's what they told me to buy. That's what
here comes young Joe, and I'm like, I read, I'm more of the nerd, the gun guy, so I read all this stuff, and I read about V-MAX, I read all this stuff, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta try them. So pretty soon, I go to the store, I'm old enough for whatever, and I get some of those, and I reload them and shoot them. And I remember showing Dad the targets because he's like, I've been shooting these for years. These work just fine. I'm like, just hold on, So I show him the targets, and he's like, oh man, those shoot pretty good. I was like, yeah, well here, let's go out and shoot some prairie dogs or whatever. And I had him hooked within 5 shots. I mean, we've all done it. When they hit, it's a thwack, and then the theatrics of the.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, it was a fun, So after that, it was. What did he call them? You got any of them red tip bullets loaded for me?
Oh, wow.
So we had fun. It's a neat backstory. So.
Yeah, no kidding. And they do shoot well. And it's, when the proof is in the pudding that way, it's an easy sell.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you mentioned a few things about their jacket, and I want to talk about the AMP bullet jacket, because if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of when that AMP bullet jacket would have been come to fruition.
Yeah. It's just the AMP is a acronym words for literally paying attention to the cup through the drawing process to the final jacket. I mean, is that a good summary, Miles? I mean, we're paying attention to every radius, detail, reduction in diameter and thickness and all of those things throughout the draws to make sure that the jacket comes out perfect.
Right.
So,
when you say perfect, how perfect are we talking?
Couple 10,000ths of an inch.
Couple tenths.
And he's referring...
indicated run out, basically.
So what we do is we take the thickness of the jacket and we pinch it, the outside, the OD and the ID of the jacket with a dial indicator and a little spud stem, and then we rotate and measure that thickness.
Oh, wow.
And if that thickness measures, more than 2 to 4 tenths, we need to look at something, right? And if you think of that, your hair on your head or a piece of paper is like 3,000. So this is a decimal place.
Even further.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a critical factor to bullet accuracy, is how perfectly circular can you make that jacket.
Right.
And if it's not perfect, you'll never draw that out of it and make that bullet shoot well.
Yes.
You will end up with inaccurate bullets.
I don't know. I'm sure you've seen that too. Even if you get lucky. Well, so there's multiple draws, but if somewhere in that draw process you blow it way out around, and then by the end of it, it comes back somehow.
They're still not as
those bullets don't shoot. Like,
but that's a great analogy, Miles, because that is to me, that is the advanced manufacturing process at its core, is paying attention to not just, oh yeah, I got a good jacket at the end. Well, if you didn't do something right in step in the middle, A or B, it doesn't come out right.
Right.
Which is that's a 100% true.
Awesome. So we got the ant bullet jackets going on, and that helps with that match accuracy that the V-MAX bullets are known for. And I'm not sure what the product line started with, but I have to believe it was 22 cal, 50, and 55s.
55s.
Yeah.
Johnny P made the first ones on A2.
Really?
It was an old gray press. We still had it when I started. Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pieces of history. Now, old Johnny P, he was on our podcast on going over how we make bullets, and he made the first 55 grain V-MAX.
Him and Ron Miller.
Wow.
Made the first ones, and they were 2255 flat base. The reason I know that is because they had to form them a certain way to get them to shoot, 2 or 3 tenths at 100 yards.
Yep. Well, and they wad up, and I think that's one of the things that V-MAXs are known for across the board. And I think back to, how many ARs are out there and how much kind of bulk 223, 5.56 ammo is out there. You want something to shoot well, just get a 223 with the 55 grain V-MAX, and that thing, if it doesn't pound a knot hole, something's wrong with it.
You need to look somewhere else.
That's definitely one of the ones that comes down to the lab. Whenever we're down in the lab, like that one is a zinger. Like that one, the V-MAX family in general. Like sometimes, certain other bullets, you'll get stuff that's like, oh, okay, that's not great, but like the V-MAXs are pretty routinely, like they come down and they wad up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're known for accuracy.
That's what I like to hear. So we've got the ant bullet jackets. That's really where that started for us. And we use that jacket technology and that process through all of our varmint and match bullets. You've got the polymer tip, you've got rapid expansion, and you've got a really, really thin jacket. Mm-hmm. And so in a nutshell, when you're talking V-MAX, that shooter is looking for accuracy at range, terminal performance on varmints that are, we're trying to keep them inside the animal, but we're trying to keep these things fur friendly. And if that's what you're into, I'd say the V-MAX is your go-to bullet.
Yeah, it's a staple. It's been around forever. Absolutely.
Yep.
There's no better time to stock your reloading bench and light up your range with Hornady Get Loaded Plus. New this year, free bullets or free cases when you buy these select Hornady reloading tools. Plus, receive the free HIT Target Impact Indicator. Hornady Get Loaded Plus. Free bullets, free cases, free HIT Target Impact Indicator. Get loaded and light it up with Hornady Get Loaded Plus. Visit Hornady.com for further details.
We're going to jump over now to the VT, because in that V-MAX conversation that we just had, one thing that we did not mention was stellar external ballistics. These are generally lighter weight bullets in the V-MAX family, and when you got a lighter bullet, you're going to juice up those velocities. You're going to get long-range potential simply by mashing on the throttle. Kind of that's what you do. You're shooting, say, a 22-250, 50 grain bullet. Well, you can flat zing those things out there. And those V-MAX bullets, we put, as good of ogive as we can on them. Some of them have a little boat tail, and that definitely helps with the external ballistics. But if you're in the business of hitting coyotes 400, 500, 600 yards away, might have a better bullet for you. Real quick before we get to the VT, one product I want to talk about explicitly is my favorite 22 cal V-MAX bullet, the 53.
I know where you're going. Yeah.
Is that your favorite?
In a 223, that is the bullet. That is it.
So let's talk about that 53 and why it's designed the way it is and what some of the limitations are, say, in a 22-250 and other things.
So the 53 specifically it was designed and maximized for 223. So we call it the head height, but it's the length of the ogive of the bullet that you can get in a magazine and still fit it in the cartridge case and crimp the mouth. So the length of the profile. And that bullet was maximized for the length of that head height in a 223.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously the twist rate. It had to be stable in a 12.
Okay. Because that's, the 223 standard Sammy twist.
And that's kind of that whole thing. We probably ought to touch on that because the historical V-MAX line was always intended for the cartridges that existed and the firearms that were in the wild, and they are
222.
Yep.
Yeah.
Triple deuce, 223, 22-250, Swift.
Right.
And all of those had a 12 or a 14 twist in 22 cal.
Mm-hmm.
And 55 V-MAX with a flat base when it's cold out at lower elevation. That's it. That's all. It's all the heavier we can make the bullet. We can't do anything else with the shape, the ogive. It's got to fit within that, magazine's platform, cartridge cases, the gun mags, and the twist rate of the barrel.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a good caveat that we should make. Now the 53 was designed for 223, but to go put it in your 22-250 takes mods, right? You can't shoot it in a 14 twist. Your magazine, the head height is shorter in a 22-250.
Right.
So you would have to do some mods to your gun to shoot it. There's guys that do, but it wasn't specifically intended and designed for that.
Yeah. That's just in general for people listening, like that's, I guess, hamstrings us a lot on bullet design is the existing cartridges that bullet's going to fit into. We can't put a really sexy bullet that isn't stable in a SAMI twist rate out on the shelf, because even if the bulk of AR-15s out there are 5.56 with a 1-7 or a 1-9-inch twist, there's still 1-12 ARs out there, or there's still
a lot
old
of bolt
factory,
guns.
right? And a lot of bolt guns, even new ones, most of them are 1-9 or 1-8, something, but they're still out there, 1-10, 1-12, 1-14s. And
So, a lot of guys don't know that.
Right.
They
And
just
so
read
22
cal.
Yeah. If you don't double check, so basically everything that we put out as factory ammo, with rare exception if there is any, is SAMI standard.
Correct.
Right.
Least common denominator, if you will. And then the other thing with the V-MAXs was, so back in the day, we didn't, when I started shooting, Miles, you can test this, and well, you can too, you're done. We didn't have all the turret scopes and the holdovers and all the stuff we had now. You had a duplex, a lot of them were a duplex crosshair 3-9, where they're 4-12, whatever. So a lot of the older legacy bullets, including the V-MAXs, were designed with shapes and weights that drive them as fast as you can in the twist rates, get the accuracy, and that way your holdovers at 200 or 300 or 400 yards is what it is.
Right.
It's flat, right? You can hold hair or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So
yeah, because I remember even like laser rangefinders. That's still relatively new.
Absolutely.
We're accustomed to them now, but yeah, it was like a relatively new thing. And then ballistic solvers that worked reliably was
absolutely.
Yeah, if you were within 3 or 4 tenths, you're like, wow, that's a pretty accurate trajectory.
Yeah.
And now we'd look at that and like, what's wrong with this?
Yeah.
So
right, we're correcting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 53, you put as much ogive as you possibly could to stabilize in a 12 twist, and then you put a little boat tail on there. And man, for the 223, that was the go-to, and still is largely for me, the go-to. If I'm shooting a 223, I'm shooting the 53.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Ballistically, nothing else can touch it. Up into the 60 grain V-MAX with the flat base, the 53 still has measurably better BC, less wind drift, flatter trajectory, higher velocity. It's just a go-to and sounds relatively light, but man, you start hitting coyotes with a 223 and 53 grainer, it works.
It works awesome. It took that volume, because let's face it, the vast majority are 223s and 5.56s out there. They just are.
Yep.
So why would you not maximize and give those guys the best tool they can get?
Yep. So we've got a great lineup, and the V-MAX still one of our best-selling bullets. But starting in about 2008, you have what I'm going to call the Hornady cartridge introduction craze, where you start to see, and it took a little bit, but you got the 6 Creedmoor, the 6.5, then you got the 6, now the 22, the 25 Creedmoor. You got the whole Creedmoor family. Throw in the ARCs. You've got the 6mm. You've got the 22. You've got the PRCs, if you're into that sort of thing. You have this rapid design of new cartridges, new chambers, and new twist rates. And that's a big one. Not to mention some of the other cartridges out there that we didn't design. 6.5 Grendel comes to mind. I get there's probably a couple 224 Valkyrie shooters left out there. So there are cartridges that are modern designed with modern twist rates. And the question was, well, we have these new twist rates. We have these new head heights. Why are we stuffing them full of V-MAX bullets? Right. It's a great bullet, but we're not giving the consumer the optimum choice here.
Yeah, I remember that, especially with the 6 arc. Like,
exactly.
Do we load
6
this
arc
with
was a big one.
Right? Do we load this with an 87 V-MAX, and then you load an 87 V-MAX, and you hold it next to like a 108, and you're like,
there's got to be a better answer here.
Yeah, we're leaving a lot of performance on the table.
Right.
Yep. So, intro, my man Jay Quillen, Jaden. This would have been years ago. I want to say 2015 or 16. It was referenced in the podcast. Jaden took his first stab at this reduced lead height. We'll get into the design of what the VT is here momentarily, but I think Jaden made the first bullets that would eventually become our VT in 2015. And I know I shot quite a few of them in competition that would have been like 2017 or 2018. And it wasn't until 2024 that we announced the ELD-VT as an official product. And these were originally designed for match shooting. That was Jaden's original design intent. But with these new cartridges, new twist rates, and some insight from you guys, this turned out to be one of the only truly dual purpose. There are a lot of bullets that do a lot of things. You can shoot a lot of coyotes with a 108 ELD match or whatever. This product in the market, as far as I know, is one of the only ones that was designed with express intent to be a varmint bullet and an equal effort put into it being a match bullet. So, jumping into the VT and some of its design, Miles, when you took this project over, what's the 30,000 foot view of what you guys were after and how you designed it that way?
Well, because we had experience with what you and Jaden had already shot, and I played around with some of those as well. And so early on, it was really kind of a science experiment to see. Basically what we took was ELD match, and then cut the lead level lower and lower and lower and lower, and just see what the effect of that was.
And as a corollary, that changes the weight and the center of pressure and center of gravity relationship.
Right, exactly. And so we have some modeling software that we looked at, and we kind of saw that as you do that in that software, there's like a happy spot for gyro stability and a couple other things. And so, we just set up a press and then cut the lead lighter and lighter and lighter, and we went through and tested them all. And our results more or less matched that software. But there was some other things that we didn't expect. I guess if you go too far,
not enough lead.
Yeah, things get a little squirrely on you. If everything is perfect, it's no big deal. But if you get any kind of like a marginal barrel or maybe even a crown issue or your seating concentricity or I don't know, something like. But if we
asymmetric brakes,
right? Yeah, I mean we would get basically like in some guns they would hammer, no problem, didn't matter, they didn't care. And then some guns you could definitely see a departure as you cut less and less lead in there. At some point they just started getting like really
unpredictable,
inconsistent. Yeah. And so we basically figured out what the geometry, what that ratio was, that we could still stay safe, but then cut as much lead out of it, what's basically an ELD match bullet, to get that velocity back out of it. And then as a byproduct of that, right, you create this huge air pocket in the nose of the bullet. And it's like, well, it's like, when that hits something, that's going to pop wide open.
Yep.
Right? Like,
can confirm. Yeah.
And so we did a bunch of terminal testing with that, and
some other live tissue testing.
Yeah, exactly. And the performance, it's different. The mechanics of it are just slightly different, but the end result, as far as if you look at what it does in gel compared to a V-MAX, the net result is very similar to what you get out of a V-MAX.
Wow.
Yeah, the thresholds, I guess, are a little bit different. The minimum expansion envelope is a little higher than a V-MAX.
Right.
Having more lead filled in there helps it pop. When you do impact, the tip sets back into lead, and you get a little bit more window on the bottom end. But what we found was that the drag reduction effects of having the way longer ogives and longer boat tails, and that the shapes carried over from the ELDM, that drag reduction benefit basically kept you even at the higher threshold further downrange.
Yeah,
that's at a bare minimum, they're eating like neck and neck, and in most situations it keeps you further downrange.
That is an interesting concept, and I think an important stress point for the listener. The V-MAX, like you said, it's got that lead kind of crowded on the tip. the tip hits the lead, and once that lead opens and starts to flow, it's just going to increase its surface area and then dramatically come apart.
Right.
And with the VT, that tip's got a little bit more of a run before it hits that lead and starts that lead flow process. So the VT requires more velocity to get it to expand when you compare it to the V-MAX. However, when you look at it as a function of distance,
Right.
those V-MAXs bleed velocity worse because they have lower BC, they have more drag.
Yep.
Whereas the VT, because it has those longer ogives, longer boat tails like a match bullet, holds on to velocity longer. So although more velocity is required to make it expand, from a distance standpoint, it's actually the same or even further than a comparable V-MAX.
Yep.
So that is an interesting takeaway.
Yeah.
Hornady Backcountry Defense Ammunition. For those backcountry encounters when a reliable round can be a lifesaver. Backcountry Defense Ammunition is loaded with DGH bullets that feature a protected point that locks the bullet nose to the core, providing maximum penetration while limiting deflection. Stay at the top of the food chain with Backcountry Defense Ammunition from Hornady.
I think another takeaway that the listener won't truly understand, we can explain it, but I don't think people will quite understand the level of what will feel like redundant iterative testing required to cut the lead this low, and then this low, and then this low, and then this low, and you have to do the same test for every iterative point in that process until you find this gives us the best accuracy with the best terminal performance and the most predictable stability.
Right.
That process had to be monumental.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, it was fun for me and for Jaden as well. I mean, to see, because we can predict it on the software, all day long, and it's cool, like the outputs that come out of that. But then to validate that and actually see what those. I mean, and then you're knee deep in ballistic calculations, across this whole span of things, and it's kind of cool to see the trade off that you get. Like if you start with 108 grain ELDM, and then you back down, to 70, 60 grains, what you're getting, you're trading basically drag for velocity and where those trade-off points happen, and then what it does to your trajectory, and then what it does to your wind deflection and all of that. So yeah, it's kind of cool to see. I mean, the general gist is higher weight, higher BC, less drag, less wind deflection, lower velocity. And then as you go lighter and lighter and lighter, you trade all those things the opposite direction. And it really depends on basically if you pull it out to 1,200 yards, the heavy bullet always wins, right? But most people aren't varmint hunting at 1,200 yards,
especially in 22 cal or even 6 millimeter.
6 millimeter. I mean, yeah, right. So like when you look at what is really an effective like animal getting range, which is like 0 to 500-600 maybe. Then you see actual real benefit of having a lighter bullet, getting the velocity gain. You give up some on wind deflection, you give up some on, velocity loss or whatever, but you also have more velocity to start with. So yeah, from that 0 to, I don't know what you call that, practical range.
Yeah.
Then actually going to a lighter bullet a lot of times makes more sense.
Yep.
From a hit probability standpoint, and terminal and everything. Hit probability is the main one, right? If you don't hit.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how good the bullet is.
Right.
If you miss it, I've used this term a lot, but like you can deposit the bullet into the dirt, and it doesn't matter if that was the most accurate bullet ever made ever.
Right.
Because, the dirt's the dirt.
Yep.
When you were going through this process, was there a particular bullet that you started with? One of the first ones?
Well, I know Jaden's initial stuff was all 6.5s.
Yep. That was a 147 that weighed 120. So the 147 ELD match.
There were several because there's both 140s and 147s that weighed 120, 135.
I was going to say the 135 was my favorite.
Yeah.
I still got them. I got 2,000 of them left.
So you were a part of the knee in the curve, right? Oh man, these are awesome, right?
They were awesome. I was picking up hits I had no business getting.
Yeah. I think the 6.5 was actually second or third. I believe we started with a 6 millimeter.
Yep.
Because I remember, and I still have some samples of the, we bumped it down to 100 grains, 95, 90, 80 grains, and then we tried some 70s and threw those away because we got to the point where it just wasn't stable anymore.
So we started with the smaller stuff, and I do remember the 6 millimeter being hot because the 6 arc, like we got to have a varmint option the 87, we got to be able to do better than that. And then I also remember that 22 arc came along.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, Joe, you're a coyote hunter. You need something.
That was, well, then I remember, Miles, once we did those light ones, then I know you jumped at least modeling right to the 308 one.
Yeah.
Then you were,
it might have been
like
a 6.5 last
I think because you bracketed and you're like, okay, if I live in this area with a big one, I live in this area with a little one.
Right.
And then I should be to get you closer on the middle stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there was definitely some learning going on because, the first test that we did was obviously just cutting lead back on the same jacket. But what then happened after that was a migration to actually cutting the jacket back as well. We kind of found the happy spot and then decided what weight we wanted to go to and then move lead and copper back together.
That's when they really started working.
So from the hunting side of this thing, we'll attack that first. Joe, you got some of the most coyotes laid down with VT bullets from before they had a name until present day. Tell us about the performance and what you saw with that VT.
So I had an AR with thermal. This is specifically thermal hunting. I had an AR-15 in a 223 and shot 53s, and I loved it. It worked great, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you would lose a few coyotes at night because you just can't hit them perfectly every single time.
Yep. You're standing off a tripod usually.
Yes, and it's a thermal.
It's hard
you can't
to gauge.
See, yep.
Right.
So that worked great. I used that for, I don't know how many seasons, and loved it. Then I got a 22 arc upper, and I thought it was magic because it was you were anchoring and killing more coyotes than you were before.
Mm-hmm. You weren't spinning them out or nothing. They were dying on the spot.
Yes, and and then leads, so picking up runners was awesome because your leads were reduced. Distance, all
Wind,
the energy on target, when everything was just, for night hunting, it was just better, flat out better. And those were 62s, and those were just fun. It was fun. I don't know how else to describe it. It was awesome.
Yep. I think the 62 grain in the 22 arc, I've shot a few coyotes at night with it. I've shot way more coyotes in the day with it.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I'll tell you what, there is something so oddly satisfying when a coyote sits down on his butt at like 500 yards and then you can see him barking at you.
Booger barking, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, yep, gotcha. And yeah, you can, I run bolt guns primarily. I do have a gas gun 22 arc, but roll the bolt on a 62 in the 22 arc and let him have it at 400, 500, 600 yards. Oh my gosh, that just lights my soul up. And that bullet, the way it handles the wind, I think is, to me, one of the highlights. Is, typically you're shooting these lighter weight varmint bullets, and at those ranges, I mean, they blow around like a windsock.
Yeah.
But these VTs, I mean, they cut your wind deflection in half or more compared to some of these other lighter weight options.
Yeah, and they just carry that energy and velocity so much better to anchor those dogs out there. So, yeah.
Yep. Miles, you done any varminting with these VTs?
Yeah. There's a lot of dead raccoons out there.
That's all right. So on the other side of that, though, you've got the the varmint hunting, which is the V in the VT,
right?
And that's actually just an accident. That's as my main man Bob Ross would put it. That is just a happy accident because their initial design intent was, how do I maximize external shape to get better drag performance while minimizing recoil, because a lot of these precision rifle games are very recoil dependent.
Right.
And at the same time, if I can pick up some velocity, great. So that was the original.
Well, that's, a key point with this too, and I remember this very vividly, was when we were doing the 6 arc, we would shoot, 108 grain, 103 grain, ELDM, ELDX, and then you'd switch and we'd go to radar testing the 80s, and it's like, did the gun break? Like, did that cycle? Like, the difference in felt recoil is like right away, noticeable. Like, big difference.
So with that kind of target thing in mind, the 6.5s, the 6s, and the 30 is the big one. So I want you guys to talk. We can talk about all of them because I have a little bit of experience shooting the 80 grain in a 6 Creedmoor. Just like you said, Miles, I thought the gun was broken. 6 Creedmoor has no recoil anyway, and I'm up on a barricade, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane.
Yeah.
This is right up there towards the speed limit, and I have no recoil. I watched that bullet leave the muzzle until it went to the target, and it went right where I was holding. That's pretty magical. But we have a 30 cal version that is way more T then V.
Yeah.
Not many people varmint hunting with a big 30 cal. Talk to us about that 174, how you landed on the weight, the shape, and how it's performed for you.
I think it's a reloader's thing only.
Yeah, of course.
But so like we said, for factory ammunition, I guess to back up, it's targeted at the 308 Winchester.
Okay.
So the target world with 308 Winchester. So you have tactical division. Joe shoots a lot of that, and PRS.
And then just all the 308s out there.
Yeah, and just everybody shooting 308. I mean, I guess you got F class and you know, whatever. There's tactical divisions and all that. So we're like, okay, what's the best bullet that we can fit into a 308 Winchester? Basically took the same concept that we had used in the smaller stuff, scaled it to, 174. Big 30 cal. And
the rest is history.
Yeah,
and it's a big bullet, quite honestly.
Yeah, so you can't fit it into SAMI cartridge overall length for the binder
2.8.
Binder plate magazines. But if you have a 2.95 AICS magazine system, then
they work fine.
Yeah, no problem at all. But,
yeah.
I mean, it's the weight for drag realm that sits in is just perfect for 308.
Well, and to go to the PRS specifically, because that's one of our biggest, precision rifle sports, the tactical division has a window of bullet weights that you're allowed to use. I think it's 168 or 155.
178.
It's 178 max for sure.
Yeah, and then up to 178.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you got to live in that window. And a lot of people shoot the 168, a classic combo.
Yep.
Or they'll shoot the 175 or R178s, also great options. But they lack the shape that gives them those good drag characteristics. They lack some ogive length. They lack some boat tail. The 174, it might be in that weight class, but as far as length is concerned, they are worlds apart.
Yep.
So, Joe, how's the 174 performed for you?
It works fine. The Finale was one with it last year.
So the PRS Finale, the guy that won the tactical division, shooting 174 VTs.
Matt was shooting 174s.
And you've shot them quite a
100%.
bit. Yeah, I know you shoot the 176 ATIP, but
I have both, though. I shoot both. I try to shoot, like I've said on here before, I try to shoot new or current lots.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I've shot 174s, and
you've won with both.
Yeah, exactly. They're a phenomenal. Like I tell people out in the field, if you haven't tried them, you're missing out. You should. I mean, obviously every person in gun and barrel and chamber is different, but you should really try these because if they work well for you, you just gain some points just because of the bullet.
That's man. Just let's kind of like to reference the ATIP. All you have to do is switch bullets, and you pick up a couple impacts in a 2-day match. Man, that's pretty good. And if you can switch to the VT in your 308 and tactical class and pick up a couple hits and have a less wind deflection, it's an easy decision.
Why would you not do it?
Yeah.
Go to the 6.5 and the 6mm. Those right there, I mean, they get, I'm going to call them questionably light. I've had people say like, well, I shoot 105 or 110 or 108 grain bullet in my 6mm. I would never go as light as an 80. Why? Well, because they don't have as good a drag.
Other than the timing of when we did the more or less the final testing on the 80 grain ELD-VT, had it been a few weeks earlier, I would have taken them to the PRS Finale in my 6-ARC.
Yeah.
Because when we did the final drag testing on the Doppler radar with them, I shot them. Part of that testing was shooting them out of my gas gun, my PRS gas gun, and I was absolutely punishing a 1,250-yard target with them. So, again, like the gun. It's a 6-ARC that's 20 pounds. It doesn't recoil, but it again was like noticeably nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a semi-auto, you have that extra recoil action going on, with the bolt cycling and everything. So like I had noticed throughout the season that there was some of the closer targets that I'm not seeing impacts because the gun's wiggling while I'm trying to watch. But yeah, like proned out, shot that thing at 1,250 yards, and I'm just absolutely punished our steel plate out there on the range. So it is a little bit light for a 6mm, but then again, you figure the bulk of all those targets are 400 to 800 yards, and you're not really leaving much. I mean, if it's an especially windy open country, sure, maybe you might be better off for wind deflection with a higher BC lower drag bullet. But overall, it's definitely worth entertaining. And if you want to pull a Jaden Quinlan, You can,
Ooh,
you
I
can,
wouldn't recommend it.
you can load your short range ammo with VTs, and then your long range ammo with a heavier match bullet.
Yeah, for reference to the listener,
And two different Ford I don't know how he keeps all that stuff.
Jaden has been known to go to a PRS match. This is back when he's shooting 6.5 with 147 ELD matches loaded at 27.30, and then those 147 ELD matches that weighed 120 loaded to 2,900, and depending on the target distance, he would stack his magazine accordingly, and then his dope card, he'd fill it out accordingly. And to my knowledge, he has not actually messed up doing that, but that takes a special kind of crazy. I wouldn't advise that at all. But there is plenty of match application, Miles. We talked about this just in passing in the office. I don't know if it ever went any further, but you've considered switching to that 100 grainer to shoot factory division in the NRL 100.
Yeah, that's and I forget exactly. You have to use a factory rifle, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But then
Is that what it is now?
Yeah,
It's something like
factory
that.
rifle. But then we have the factory
Factory
VT load, and if that shoots in your gun, I mean that's cheating.
Yeah. Is this fast?
Yeah,
It's good in the wind.
Yeah, you're pushing the velocity limit. The targets, especially in NRL Hunter, are closer range, so the wind isn't as big of a detractor. What you're losing in wind deflection, I guess, isn't that big of a hit.
I agree. You gain that in range estimation because they're flatter.
Right, and where you have to range the target yourself, you buy a lot of leeway in the vertical realm just because the trajectory is that much flatter.
Sure.
And the recoil, felt recoil on those 100 grainers in a 6.5 Creedmoor feels about like a 6.5 or a 6 arc or a 6 Creedmoor.
Fantastic.
Utilize your space your way with the modular Hornady Security Square Lock Organizing System. Mount the Square Lock panels anywhere in your home or shop. Then attach the wide assortment of Square Lock accessories to securely store firearms, tools, gear, or any other valuables in any possible configuration. Keep your reloading bench or gun room organized with the Square Lock Modular Organizing System from Hornady Security.
So there's double-edged sword there, the varmint side and the target side. And in comparing that to the V-MAX, the V-MAX, as great as it is, and in short-range accuracy, if you're looking for that, you can certainly use it as a match bullet. But they generally lack the ogive length and the exterior ballistics that you really want to make those 400, 500, 600-yard shots. The VT line has a much longer ogive, longer boat tail, so you're going to have better exterior ballistics. You're still going to have that same terminal performance that you love out of the V-MAX. The corollary, though, you have to have the twist rate to support these bullets and the ability to, if you're going to hand load them, you got to have the head height available in your chamber and in your magazine. Factory ammo options are the easy button, of course. We've got a whole line of ammo. If you look at the V-MAX, you've got V-MAX in custom. You've got V-MAX in black. You've got V-MAX in Varmint Express. You got V-MAX in Super Performance Varmint. I mean, you got V-MAX everywhere. And then you switch over to the VT. When we were doing this bullet in 2023 to launch it in 24, I was under the impression that you can't have a bullet like the ELD-VT and not have a dedicated line of ammo to support it. Granted, you can't fill all the cartridge lineups with it, but you can have your Creedmoor family, you can have your ARC family, and that is a quickly growing segment of shooters. I was at a gun shop in New Zealand here recently, and you want to buy a 6.5 Creedmoor, they had every rifle make and model sold in New Zealand available in 6.5 Creedmoor, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that should hopefully help the listener kind of decide if you're traditional twist rate or, maybe not shooting super far, the V-MAX line, I can't tell you enough how accurate and explosive that bullet is. If you're trying to push the boundaries in range on varmints, or you're looking to lower the recoil for your target shooting, man, that VT is one slippery bullet that I said it prior, but explicitly designed for varmint use, while at the same time being explicitly designed for target use. And we gave each of those a very, very I don't know, fine-tooth comb when we went through the design. The shapes of those bullets weren't on accident, and then once you select the shape, the kind of weight fell into place, if you will. But a lot of testing, a lot of design went into all of these. So real quick, I have a question for you guys. If you had to pick one in each family, what's your favorite?
Just a bullet I got to load, or
Yeah, you just got to shoot a bullet. One V-MAX, one VT. What's your favorite?
The V-MAX for me would be pretty easy. That's 22.55.
55, not to 53.
Well, because 22.250.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up on that. I mean,
that's bread and butter. That's
call it
milk
sentimental.
and honey. Yep.
Oh man.
Now in the VT line, you've got the 174 that you've competed and won
I
with.
was gonna say you're killing
and
me.
you got the 22 because I know what you do all winter.
I know, but now we load one of those in a 22 Creed and 22 Arc, and you're gonna make me pick out what horse I'm gonna take out of the stable. I don't, because I have a bolt gun in 22 Creed that's just fun. It's just
maybe
awesome.
you just pick 22 Cal.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
I'll do that then.
Miles, what do you got?
V-MAX. It's a tough call there. One of the 22s for sure.
Yeah.
50, 53, 55.
If I have to shoot a 223 though, like I have to pick a 53. Like again.
Yeah. I would say I've probably shot more 53s than anything in the V-MAX line.
I know when you interned here and then left, you had a few 53s in tow.
Yeah. And then the 80 grain 6mm VT.
Yeah. Yeah, that thing is.
Just because you own like, I don't know how many arcs.
All of them.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 guns
are arcs.
That's a lot. I think if I had to pick a V-MAX, I'd probably go with the 75 grain and 25 cal. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the VTs, for me, the 135 that never existed in 6.5 was pretty cool.
Still special.
But man, that 62 and a 22 arc. I talked about my bolt gun or bolt guns. My goodness, there's few combinations that put a smile on your face like that. So
that is true.
For the listener out there, I'd encourage you to email us, podcast@hornady.com, or drop a comment here if there's a product in these lineups, the V-MAX or that new VT, that you'd like to see. Because we're all shooters and enthusiasts of the sport ourselves. We just happen to be employees. So, Joe and Miles, from shooter Seth, not employee Seth, from shooter Seth, man, a 25 cal would be real cool in the VT line.
Well, it would be very cool.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that. So take that with duly noted. I would love to see 25 cal. Listeners, let us know if you'd like to see 25 cal as well, or anything else that you got in mind. Gentlemen, is there anything else between the V-MAX and the VT that you want to leave the listener with?
Well, if you get a shooter Seth one, do I get a shooter Joe one?
Yeah.
I want to convince Jason to let us load the 174 in a 300 PRC.
Yeah, buddy.
Super speed. And
that was kind of my final parting thing was don't discount these bullets for magnums because the 6.5 100 grain and a 6.5 PRC is absolutely brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And that 174 and a 300 PRC is potentially the most destructive ballistics gel shot I have ever witnessed.
That's saying a lot. You shot a lot of gel. That's a good point, though. Don't sleep on these things for the Magnum. Especially
Absolutely.
As the hand loader 6.5 PRC, you can buck some of that recoil down, take it out there, and shoot on some coyotes or something like that.
And then the other thing, Seth, I know this segment is probably small, but we never mentioned it. The guys that do a ton of culling in Africa, where they have to cull and headshots are a must.
Yep.
Both of these, they shoot V-MAXs now by hundreds. But leave the listener with like, hey, you guys that are doing that, the VTs are even going to be a little bit better at doing that just from the things we just talked about.
Okay. That you're a small segment, but
it's important to those guys.
And they're able to use that meat commercially. Obviously,
Correct.
They don't want any lead in the body. They're all taking headshots. That's a good point, Joe.
So. Anything
Anything else?
I'm trying to think what Shooter Miles would go for here.
Shooter Miles.
I think I'm kind of with your heart of hearts in that maybe there's definitely some we definitely hit the light end of the spectrum with most of these. I think there's some heavier stuff in existing calibers that could be could fill out. So yeah,
that's true.
There may still be time for your 120 or 135 6.5.
Yeah. Well, until then, I've got a couple thousand of them from 2018 under my desk. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for diving into the V-MAX and the VT, both great bullet options for the varmint hunter. Got some target option and availability there as well. I don't have anything else for you. So, again, thanks for coming on the show.
No, enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Everybody out there, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Hornady Podcast. I hope you learned something about the V-MAX and the ELD-VT bullet that are both really good options for the varmint hunter. That VT really going to help you stretch the legs if you've got the twist rate for it. So, again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one.